Board of Education meeting USD230 to order. Candy, please collect the roll.
We'll start the vote with, roll call or vote?
Roll call,
Okay.
please.
Mrs. Melius,
Here.
Mr. Ewing,
Here.
Mrs. Sealing, Mr. Hoffman,
Here.
Mr. Updike,
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. First action on our agenda is to approve the agenda.
So move.
Second. Moved and second for approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? Candy, please collect the vote.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Melius.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, board members, for being here. Thank you for those in the audience. Appreciate you being here. Moving on to good news recognitions and announcements. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, have a few items that want to talk about. If I can pull them up here. For whatever reason, they're not showing up there, but a couple of items that we did have a student that was recently named to the all-state football team for class 5, Colt McKenna. He's he is a junior. We had 2 other students that were named honorable mention. We also, as we said, have had some students out at Prairie Creek Elementary School last week and this week before the holidays doing a canned food drive. And they recently on the Prairie Creek website gave a list of items that they most like to have donated. And again, all of that will go to a local food pantry for families that are in need. And then outside of that, we set a lot of holiday programs going on this week as we head into the holiday break, while students are also still meeting and doing preparing for their in some of our schools their finals. And we also have had some students at our elementary schools in math this semester participating in some virtual online continental math leagues that are for various categories of math, whether it be calculus or algebra or geometry. There's different rounds of tests, and we've had a couple of our elementary schools participate. You do problem solving on the questions. There's like 6 problem solving type questions for each category. You solve them, send your results in, and the most recent one was had to be mailed in, I think, like right before Thanksgiving. So they should be getting that information returned soon on how they did. Those schools have participated, and it's ongoing throughout the school year. So again, always our students are keeping busy, whether it be performing extracurricular activities or participating in the classroom, against other peers, as well as giving back to the communities in which their schools are at, through service like the food drives. That's my good news recognitions and announcements.
Very good. Sounds like good things going on. Moving on to business with individuals. Candy?
No cards were received.
Very good. Moving on then to our consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda, approval of the minutes of the November 28th, 2022 meeting, clerk's report, treasurer's report, payroll and claims, personnel, driver's education fees for summer 2023, approval of the music equipment for the new Forest Spring Middle School, elementary and secondary school emergency relief 3 application. Any questions or discussion on the consent agenda?
I just wanted to say that whoever did the application for the ESSER three funds was very well written. There were some points in there that I'm glad were made, and hopefully they'll read them and see the situation they put us in. So
Any other questions or comments?
with that, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's moved and seconded for approval of the consent agenda. Any final questions or comments or discussion? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to action items. Our first action item of the evening is 7.01 for Spring Middle School furniture bid approval. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, last meeting, Mr. Meek gave us an update on some information about, the furnishings for that building as we're trying to get those items ordered so we receive them in time. And it was indicated that we had hoped to have, that we would have our furniture bids, and we were hoping that we would stay under the threshold that really requires formal approval. But we did get those bids in, I believe it was last week. And those bids were, like most everything else, a bit higher than anticipated, and we're a little bit over that threshold. So we wanted to make sure that you all were aware of those. And so Mr. Meek is here, and if he wants to comment. The one thing is we still are recommending approval simply because of the fact that even the manufacturer, while the price is increased over what we had thought, we're being told that there's likely to be another price increase that goes into effect after the first of the year. So Mr. Meek, any insight you want to offer on that?
No, that was really the case. I just felt like originally you said it would probably be on the consent agenda, but I really felt like with the dollar amount it is, that it should go before you guys. So if there's any questions you have or not. I will say one of the things we're looking at is like steel shelving. It's not on here yet. It won't meet the $20,000 range, but the steel shelving people right now have a 44% steel surcharge on their bid. So most of the furniture we have is steel or plywood with a laminate on it. So when you think about those two things, it's not a really mystery that it's up about 35% from what it was when we bid it out for Woodland Springs in 2019. So,
So just to clarify, this is all coming out of bond money.
this will come out of bond budget or capital outlay. It's kind of who gets there first, because we've seen quite a little bit of increase in other things that would come out of the bond as well. So I can tell you this is coming out of bond, but the next thing we take out may have to come out of capital outlay. So our FF&E budget is going to be over, just because in 2018, when we passed the bond, there was no way to see that we were going to be paying 35 or 40% more than what we thought we would for a lot of the items that we're bidding out. So
would that come out of the overage? Would that come out of contingency, or would the overage?
with what, if we have some contingency left, but we used a lot of that contingency to buy land with. So when we bought the land for the future sites, the 175th and Ridgeview site plus Woodland Spring, that is where a lot of our contingency goes. So yeah, if we have some contingency left there, it may come out, but a lot of it's going to come out of the capital outlay account that will go over on FF&E. So
Got it.
Doug and I've had some discussions about that. So I think he's prepared. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think it was last meeting you mentioned some new things for Spring Hill Middle School.
Mhm.
Was
Yeah, there
that
is
included?
about $80,000 worth of classroom furniture in this price as well for Spring Hill Middle School.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's included.
That's included in that
Okay.
price. So, yeah. Trying to, they didn't want to convert all of their rooms at this point, and also so they can sell their teachers on them, kind of let some other people experiment with it and also we're putting in several classrooms of furniture in there though, so.
Any other questions for Mr. Meek?
Mr. President, I move we approve the purchase of the where we got the furniture.
Yeah.
As presented.
Second.
It's moved. Thank you. It's moved and seconded to approve the Forest Spring Middle School furniture bid as presented. Any final questions or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Updike.
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing. Yes. Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
approved.
Good, thank you. Thank you. Moving on to discussion items. Discussion item 8.01, purchase of Windows desktop computers for staff and students. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, this, again, it would not be acted on formally until the January meeting. That, again, about approximately every 5 years, our cycle is to replace out our desktop for our teachers as well as the student devices, not the one-to-one devices for students, but the ones that basically are going to the labs that our students use at the elementary schools and middle schools. It's approximately 545 separate computers. Mr. Elliott put in there for you a lot of a complete spec sheet that you can tap into that provides on the various models that they're currently looking at that are all within pretty much a similar price range. The main reason that we want to get this moved on and again acted on if we can in January, because again, wanting to make sure that the manufacturer that we go with can get us the devices in the time frame in which they're needed. And Mr. Elliott is here if you have any questions of him. But we will act on it formally, in January.
I always have a question. Just curious, why, just to go through it again, why do we do it in a 5-year rotation? And has that rotation time changed over the years? Has it gotten longer, shorter, with better?
Yes.
Yeah.
How many years you want me to go back? Yeah, we've gone as long as 7. Those of you that have been around, maybe recall when we originally lost our capital outlay levy. We got pretty creative for a couple of years there. We've gone as short as 4 with some devices that just didn't make it. What we're starting to see is at about the 5-year mark, we start to see just random failures. The HDMI ports start failing, the screens go out. I mean, that's just kind of been the sweet spot. We could probably get a 6th year out of them, but I'm not sure we save in the man hours to maintain them.
And you don't have the man hours.
No,
Short. So,
no.
yeah.
So that's typically why we've stuck with the 5-year. On the portable devices, we try to go to 4 because they just get used and abused a little harder.
Okay.
So.
Thanks, Phil.
Yep. Any other questions?
It's all capital outlay, right?
Yeah, there'll be a few, as I indicated there's a few that might come out of a specialty budget in nutrition services if they're just dedicated to nutrition services department, that kind of stuff. But 95+% will be capital outlay. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to our second discussion item of the afternoon, 8.02 elementary English language arts instructional materials adoption. Dr. Luttrell.
Yes, Dr. Smith is here and she will give you a brief overview of the process that was utilized to recommend the purchase of the instructional resource materials that are needed to support the K-5 reading language arts curriculum. And again, this is only for discussion this evening. Formal approval will be asked for in January. And there's a lot of attachments there that she'll talk about, but she'll talk to you about mainly the process that was used for the pilot in determining, that this was felt the best resource to purchase at this time. So Dr. Smith.
Thank you. And I have a few co-presenters with me this evening. I have some teachers who are part of our ELA curriculum team, Carrie Bates, who is a kindergarten teacher at Timber Sage, John Schulte, who is a third grade teacher at Prairie Creek, and Ashley O'Malley, who is a third grade teacher at Wolf Creek. And they'll be sharing in some of the presentation duties tonight to give you a little bit of insight to what product we're recommending and why we are recommending this particular instructional resource for our students. So we are looking at K-5 English Language Arts. The last adopted material for this content area was the 2012-2013 school year. So this is actually well past what we would consider kind of the shelf life of instructional materials. So it's definitely time for us to renew and refresh our materials for this content area. This aligns with our strategic plan in regards to academic excellence. So we're making this recommendation as part of our pursuit for academic excellence for each student to meet or exceed those grade level academic expectations. Just to review quickly the timeline for this process, we actually started the adoption process last year. So we began in the spring semester putting together that ELA curriculum team, going through and establishing our criteria for evaluating products, all the way up through just recently they finished the pilot of the second product. So just kind of wanted to give you a quick insight to how long our teachers have been working on this. So it's been almost an entire year now that we've been researching and reviewing products that we feel like would be a good fit for our students. And so we'll delve a little bit more deeply into each of the different steps. The first piece obviously was to assemble the team. So with English Language Arts K-5, we have a teacher from each building who sits on the grade level team so that there is equal representation across the schools. And you can see we have the same 5 steps in place. So this should be pretty familiar from the instructional resource adoptions that we've done previously. So we did a little bit of pre-screening, piloting, evaluating, and then we'll be submitting a proposal to you tonight. So we had 27 different teachers who actually piloted materials. We had input from our 6 elementary reading interventionists to help us screen and evaluate resources. All of our elementary principals actually participated in this process. We had the opportunity this time around to go visit neighboring districts and see some of the resources that we were reviewing in action. We had our instructional coaches and special education teachers participating as well. So the team had a really strong representation across grade levels and positions. So there was a lot of input from a number of different individuals. In that first piece of work that we really begun in January, we really spent a lot of time researching what materials are available, how are other schools, going about selecting, what criteria do we want to put in place. So we established evaluation rubrics across the different grade levels. So there are a number of different documents attached to this item on board docs tonight. There are 2 types of rubrics that you'll see on there. The first one was to what we call pre-screen materials. So as we look broadly across a number of different products, the pre-screening rubric was what we use to narrow down the scope of choices. And then there is a pilot rubric that we used for when we actually tried those top 2 choices. And the pilot rubric is just a bit more in-depth than the pre-screen. And they're also varied by grade level. So we'll talk a little bit about tonight why we have some different rubrics used: kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and then a 3rd through 5th grade rubric. We pre-screened 6 different products. And so you can see which different vendors we looked at. So we had 6 different products and 5 vendors. We actually looked at 2 different McGraw-Hill products. And then this all happened from January to May. And we met with the vendors and heard their product demonstrations. And then our teachers completed the pre-screen rubric. And we ended up with some pretty, I think, overwhelming results as far as which two were the top two choices. So when it came down to it, at the end of May, we had a program, it's called Core Knowledge Language Arts from a vendor Amplify, and then Open Court Reading from McGraw-Hill were the top two choices from the pre-screening phase. So these were the two products that we piloted this semester. So our teachers started with Open Court in August, and then just after parent-teacher conferences in October, they then implemented Core Knowledge Language Arts. So they piloted both of these two programs. And I just want to give them a lot of kudos because they did quite a bit of work to prepare for the pilots. They met in collaborative teams through PLC to plan and prepare for the implementation of these two instructional resources. They sat down this summer and in the fall to do a lot of professional development so that they could implement them appropriately and correctly. So they did a tremendous amount of work, and it was a lot of time and energy on their part. So we've been doing two pilots, CKLA and Open Court. They did a number of activities to prepare for these pilots, to do some professional development. And then we had the opportunity throughout the pilots to regularly meet with the vendors to routinely ask questions and get more feedback from those reps, just to make sure we really had a thorough understanding of both products. So I mentioned before that we have some different rubrics that we're using. We have rubrics that are specific at K1 and 2 so that we can address all of the areas of phonics. So when you're thinking about students learning to read, getting those letter sounds, learning their letter names, learning how to blend words, we wanted to make sure we had all of these things covered within our rubrics. So you'll see on those tools that there are some unique things that are different for kindergarten, first and second grade. But throughout K5, these are all the areas that we evaluated. And then these are those K2 things that are unique. So on board docs, you not only have copies of the evaluation materials themselves, but also then how those results panned out with the teachers. So you can kind of see, it'll say like kindergarten pilot data, and it will tell you where the product ranked with our kindergarten team for each of those different areas. So they did some very thorough screening and evaluating. And so as we got that pilot data back in, CKLA definitely was that preferred selected product between CKLA and Open Court Reading. So we would be recommending the purchase of CKLA from Amplify as the product for K5 English Language Arts. And then I just wanted to invite up the team so they could share a little bit of their feedback as to why this is a good recommendation for our students.
Good evening, I'm Carrie Bates. I'm kindergarten from Timber Sage Elementary. I enjoyed using CKLA because I thought it had a really good balance of fantasy and nonfiction, or fiction and nonfiction stories. And at the kindergarten level, I think it's such a foundational aspect of their learning and growth that it's good to expose them to nonfiction as equally as fiction. I also really liked how it was a cross-curricular curriculum. So we could incorporate our science, our social studies, our reading. With kindergarten, you have to move quickly. You have to be ready to jump from one subject to the next subject. And so this provided a strong base to support all of those learning areas and to cohesively put it together. The students loved the stories, and they would get rich conversation through the vocabulary that CKLA provides, which enhances their writing, and just through their conversation as we would complete story webs. They really liked that too. CKLA provides some great ideas for teachers to use that vocabulary throughout the lessons as well as throughout the day. They encourage word walls, graphic organizers, anchor charts, and they also provide material to reteach lessons if you see that students have been struggling to grasp the concept, as well as they provide materials for small group instruction to really drive home the goals you are trying to teach. Throughout the curriculum, they have pausing points for you to stop with students and check if they're learning and what they're comprehending and what they can retell. And I really like how they build those in. So as a teacher, you don't have to remember to stop and do that. It's a really good guide.
All right, good evening. My name is John Schulte. I teach third grade at Prairie Creek, and thanks for having us this evening. As I've reflected on teaching CKLA, I guess identified kind of 4 areas that I believe really make CKLA an excellent program for our kids. The first is kind of like what was touched on earlier, is just the academic vocabulary. It's a very high quality. It's words that kids are able to really apply, and I definitely believe that the vocabulary skills that they're taught increases their understanding of the text. And I also believe that it helps with their writing and speaking as well. The second point that I'd like to make is the cross-curricular content. The text is extremely rich in science and social studies content, and that it really allows for me as a teacher to really embed those science and social studies standards within my reading and writing instruction. Thus really allowing for more time to really get deep and ensure the students are meeting those standards. The third reason why I found CKLA to be good for kids is the assessment components. Assessment really is ingrained within each lesson and really provides teacher an opportunity to informally and regularly assess student mastery of content. I'd say probably the fourth and most important reason that I believe CKLA is a good program is student engagement. The kids love the content. They enjoyed the stories. And I think to piggyback on that a little bit, I too, as a teacher, was excited to teach the material and found it very engaging. And so I think that that's probably most important, is that student engagement piece. So thank you.
Good evening, Ashley O'Malley from Wolf Creek Elementary School, also third grade. I just first wanted to express this appreciation to Dr. Smith for allowing us the opportunity to go through this process together as teams and also have an input and say into this curriculum. It was a really interesting opportunity, and I felt like we came together across the elementary schools through this process and in our teams to really evaluate this high quality curriculums versus each other and versus our current curriculum. I'll be the first to admit I was a little skeptical as we started to adopt and get into these first two. As we started to review a little bit of the vocabulary, some words like axial bones and spinal column and cranium for third graders, I was thinking, how in the world am I supposed to teach this? I went over to Dr. Smith and I was almost in tears, like, oh my goodness. And I have to say that I highly underestimated our students because they quickly rose to that challenge. Students were able to access rigorous content that scaffolds background knowledge year upon year. Students were introduced to Dr. Wellbody, a character that they also meet in first grade. So if this was a curriculum that was adopted, they would see some of these familiar content and people throughout the stories that build upon one another. One student said that her favorite part of the program was seeing how the brain works in the different lobes. She didn't know that the brain had to work so hard in so many things, including reading. And this is a student that sees a reading interventionist. And so we started talking, it talks about neurons and then how the nerves have to move through the different lobes to even read. And so she was thinking, I'm making new pathways in my brain as I learn this. And it was just really incredible, all of those things you could see firing. There was also diversity and representation. Another student said that we learned a lot about the way that our bodies work, but also how some people might not get that opportunity, like if they were deaf or blind. There's a whole chapter on other people overcoming disabilities and how we might do that. So a lot of representation. One thing that I think that we've had to strive through in education, and even more so following COVID, is utilizing every instructional minute that we can. CKLA provides naturally embedded check-in opportunities and those cumulative assessments so that we can maintain our value time with students. Whereas our current curriculum, we might have to stop and pause Fridays and take a whole instructional time for a lengthy test. This gave us many times throughout the program. And because it is a unit of study, so we did the human body for a whole unit, we really got to dig deep into that curriculum and content so that we knew that they fully understood that and then move forward through that unit assessment. There were also opportunities for extension within the program for our students who need further enrichment. For example, a few students completed a novel study and also put on a reader's theater play that had our whole class saying, "The cranium protects the brainium," for weeks. In closing, I did just note that a quote from Angela Watson, "Kids deserve to have a passionate teacher who lights a spark within them, and teachers deserve to have incredible lessons that we look forward to implementing." And I think the important thing was, as a teacher, you don't just want to teach how to know main idea and point of view, but you want to spark that curiosity. And after every lesson, I felt that students were asking more questions and continue to do so.
We did hear that over and over from our teachers who were participating in the pilot, that the text was very informative and rich content. So all of these cross-curricular opportunities, the students latched on to these science and social studies concepts as part of their reading lessons. So we heard that across the board. I also invited Mrs. Endicott tonight just to give you a little bit of the administrator perspective, seeing all of the different grade levels implement CKLA in action, just what her views and representing the views of our elementary principal team, what they had to share about this particular product.
Good evening. I was fortunate enough to go to observe some of the schools, which was incredible because we saw it firsthand before we even dove into it. But we were sitting in a kindergarten classroom and all of us, I swear, failed the first kindergarten question on the assessment that they were giving. And we were all like it was crazy because it was about the eye and we didn't answer it correctly. But so that was our first, was like, oh gosh, this is really rigorous. And so, and I think there was a lot of apprehension from our staff about the high vocabulary, which I was super impressed with, and the content that it delivers. But as Ashley said, our students, they stepped up and they were very interested in it. It was new. It wasn't like they're pounding something into their head, main idea. It really, the learning became very natural in the content that it was, that it provided. I think it's very strong. One of the things we've struggled with Wonders is it not being strong in phonemic awareness and phonics and producing readers from the very low grade levels. This has a very strong component in phonemic awareness and phonics, as well as I spent quite a bit of time in my 3rd through 5th grade classrooms and just really rigorous high content that the students are super engaged in. The other thing that I really heard a lot from parents that were coming into our IEP meetings is that previously they would ask their students what they learned, and what was the answer we always get? Nothing. I didn't learn anything today. They were actually sharing what they had learned about the body systems and about the different 5th grade was Inca and Maya, and they were sharing with their parents what they had learned and going home very excited. And I think that's exciting for a principal to hear, instead of somebody, a kid going home going, I didn't learn anything today. That's not what we want them to do when they go home. But I have been very impressed with CKLA, both the teachers. There's some things to learn and it's very rigorous, but the other thing I like about it is although a new teacher can pick it up and go along with it very easily and really utilize it well. A seasoned teacher can also use it in the PLCs. It can be used. Although it's very scripted, there's still opportunities for our teachers to be teachers and use their autonomy to put teaching strategies in to make it more engaging and more productive for our students. So overall, I was pretty impressed with the program.
So we are recommending the purchase of CKLA, which is published by Amplify. This is just a quick breakdown of the different costs associated with this for a 7-year subscription and materials fees between students and teachers. I do want to point out that this particular product, this accounts for anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes of a student's instructional day every day. So there are a number of things that go along with an English language arts purchase between teacher materials, student materials, and things that are offered both print and digital. This quote also includes a number of professional development sessions for our staff, both on not only using their resources, but also around the science of reading, good pedagogy with reading instruction. So what's the best thing for students in regards to planning and preparing lessons that are going to ensure that they master the content. So 7 years, the full quote is attached for you on board docs. So should this get approved at the January meeting, then our next steps would include ordering and distributing the different materials to each of the teachers. What I think is helpful about the timing right now is that this is an implementation for the fall 23-24 school year. So we have an entire spring semester as a team to begin professional learning, to do curricular work, to align our curriculum documents K-5 with a new reading resource. So we'd be giving ourselves a lot of lead time to plan and prepare for the fall implementation. So what questions can we answer for you tonight? I did want to just let you know too, I have shared with Candy and Rachel access for you for the online portion so they can, wonderful. So you'll be able to see essentially what is included with the curriculum for online. And then we have samples of the curriculum upstairs for you to view if you'd like to as well.
Just, it's kind of a question for you, probably Dr. Smith and maybe some of the teachers, but so my daughter teaches in another district and they're actually piloting this as well. So she was talking about, and I actually kind of knew what she was talking about because I went to the Wolf Creek Site Council and they were talking about it. But she had mentioned that she felt like this curriculum spoke more to the science of reading than the kind of, it was different, a lot different than kind of your traditional curriculums, but it really was more research-based. Would you agree with that, or could you expand on that a little bit?
I would agree with that. So if you recall, probably about 3 or 4 years ago at the state level, there was a group that was assembled around dyslexia. So it was a dyslexia task force, and they started putting together a number of recommendations for schools when adopting materials and developing instructional blocks of time for students. So what I think is really helpful about CKLA is when those recommendations from that dyslexia task force were formally adopted by the State Department of Education, CKLA meets all of those recommendations. So when Mrs. Endicott talked about the strong like phonemic awareness and phonics strand, it follows the science of reading. It follows those recommendations from the dyslexia task force. It's much stronger in all of those areas than the current reading resource that we have. So yeah, it's very aligned with current research for reading instruction.
Thank you.
So I had a question just about timing. You had said the last time we adopted was 2012, and that was a long time ago. What is the general cycle?
The general cycle to review resources is every 7 years. And for some products, you may extend the amount of time that you're going to use them because the product still follows research. There hasn't been a change to state standards, so it still aligns with those. So sometimes, and it's not unusual for something like English language arts to be extended because it's a very expensive purchase. So that's not unusual as long as the research still holds up, the standards have remained the same. But on average, you want to review things every 7 years because that follows KSDE's review cycle of standards. They review content standards every 7 years, so you want to align your curricular work with that.
Do you think that, so the cost and everything we have laid out here, how do we, whenever they publish a new edition, do we then review or put that, do we update? Like, how does that work?
So generally, if they do any type of update within the lifespan of your quote, then you're typically provided those materials, especially with your online access. Those things can change regularly, but you're provided with that. So for 7 years, we would be covered as far as teacher materials and student materials, being able to stay current with additions and any changes that they would make.
Do you know how much we've spent for the Wonder program since 2012?
Off the top of my head, I do not,
Okay.
but I could tell you, I could find that out for you. And this definitely is it's a higher ticket item, but Doug and I have had conversations and he's told me I don't need to arrange a bake sale or a car wash just yet, so.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you, and this is, I guess, well, for all five of you. Do you feel like this compared to the open court, right? Or the two that you piloted and looked at? Do you feel that this one elevates our standard, our expectation and the standards more than the other options you looked at? I guess open court from McGraw-Hill and are the two you really looked at?
Yeah, and the team is welcome to chime in, but I would say that among all of the products we looked at, we were most impressed with the level of rigor for our students with CKLA. And like they shared, our kids really rose to that challenge. You know, you forget sometimes kids in elementary, they're sponges. They love the complex vocabulary because they like to say things like cranium.
Right.
So it absolutely raises that level of rigor, but our kids responded with high levels of engagement to it. So yeah, it absolutely outperformed its competitors in that regard.
To me as a principal, it felt like open court when I would walk in, it was just McGraw-Hill rewriting it.
It was what?
It was McGraw-Hill rewriting Wonders to fit the little components that
Oh.
they tried of science of reading, but it was very similar to Wonders to me as a principal walking in.
Well, I thought I heard Carrie, Ashley, and all three, Josh as well, talk about concerned about the vocabulary. Initially, students really stepped up to it, had very active. I think Josh, you mentioned haven't had a very active vocabulary that helped understand the text, I guess, is how I interpreted that.
In my experience,
Uh-huh.
the two, I felt like open court was still reading Wonders, like we're still sitting.
Yeah, because
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In my experience, I felt like open court was still very similar to Wonders, where we were getting out the books and going through this. Can we find the main idea? Can we find the detail sort of thing? Whereas with CKLA, we would be done. And then I'm like, okay, it's time for lunch. And then they're like, that's it. That was reading today. That was what and so they were so absorbed by it that it didn't feel like they were just sitting there doing reading. And then it was also applicable to other things. Like when we talked about axial bones and how they rotate and move, then we were outside talking about axis. And they were like, look, when I move the ball like this, it's like on an axis. So I could see that the minds were working in other ways that open court did not provide that same experience.
just that engagement and excitement about me. Well, who won't remember the cranium protects the brainium? That's what my question, I guess, is to everyone, but I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, we know our kids do. And one thing I'll say too, just thinking long-term about why it's so important to have a program that delves deeply into academic vocabulary. Our students do better in high school with those career and technical education courses, with courses in science and mathematics, because they've had a really strong foundation with this academic vocab previously. So lots of times, and even ACT did a study on this, that sometimes they don't score as well, not because they can't find the main idea, but because they don't have that broad base of academic vocabulary, and they therefore don't necessarily apply their skills in the way that they would if they knew these terms and could identify them more easily. So not only I think will it help, achieve proficiency in reading at the elementary level, but I could see how well this will impact our students as they move on to middle school and high school. I think they'll be much better prepared to engage in higher level courses as they get into the secondary levels.
Yeah. Nice.
I really like the rigor and the phonics and that the students enjoyed it. My question is, how are parents involved in the process of selecting these?
So I had the opportunity to share with site councils our process, and that we have parent representation on our site councils. So we shared the process with them, and then we also provided some samples of the materials.
Great, thank you.
And there is a nice parent connection. So as part of the resource, there are some sheets that go home with each unit so that parents can stay connected to what's happening in the classroom.
Excellent, thank you.
Will our online access give us, will we have the activity books to look through?
So the online access should allow you to see both what the teachers see and what the students see. And then in our storage room as well, we have complete sets of the teacher materials and the student activity books. And I have those in a PDF too. So if for some reason the online's being kind of tricky, I can always send those to you as well.
Awesome. And do the kids hold the same student access for all of their years?
So do they have digital access each year?
Well,
Yes.
I was trying to get to per student cost, and the activity books, it says we're like servicing almost 13,000 kids, but if I do the math for the student online, it's not that. It's
So you do have more print at K and 1 and 2, whereas, because obviously they're doing a lot of writing. There is a little bit of digital access though at every single grade level, but your 3 through 5 are going to probably use a little more digital than your younger kids.
okay. Is there a reason why we're not showing the same? Like, I would assume the per student cost for 7 years would get me to the same number of students that we're servicing as the student online access.
Yes.
It's not.
And it's not, well, let me delve into the quote a little bit more and I can break that down.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Appreciate it. It's a rigorous process. All right, moving on to our next discussion item, which is discussion regarding the Rural Housing Incentive District Partnership with the City of Spring Hill. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, we have had a discussion on this for a considerable period of time. This process has been in works with the city, over a period of time, even predates, our current city administrator predates me, but it did pick up in earnest, this summer and through the fall. We did have a work session on this where the developer, representative for the developer of the city of Spring Hill on late November, I think it was around the 19th, we spent a couple hours of discussion, being able to provide information, answer questions about how this RHID project would work. We came back at our last meeting we had and discussed it further. Again, allowed opportunities for questions to be asked. And then the city of Spring Hill has had public hearings on it. They just closed, I believe, last Thursday, their comment period on it. And now the 30-day clock ticks. And then within that 30 days, as we've said, the school district does have the wherewithal, if they object, can prevent this project from moving forward. At the last meeting, we shared information from our financial advisor, Raymond James, Greg Rauenberg. We showed you the impact that this project would have long-term over a period of years on our mill levy, which in the end was, minimal when you consider the whole wide range of impact that could come out of this project. And so there needs to be two basically options. One is basically if the consensus as a whole, as a body is that, hey, this is a good project, you don't have to act at all and we could just move forward and it would go into effect. But if there's consensus that this is something that you just don't feel is want to move forward with, there needs to be a formal motion and vote made to that effect. My recommendation that I submitted to you, and this was after, like I said, I spent a lot of time looking at the numbers, looking at the answers that were provided, from questions that each of you had asked, looking at the insight that Mr. Virenberg provided, talking with our internal staff, with our finance director, Mr. Schwinn, Mr. Meek. And again, my recommendation is that the board, USD230, move forward with the project in partnership with the city of Spring Hill. I do believe it has a lot of positive potential in terms of if it helps spur some economic development, that's going to be a boon to the district. If it helps spur additional rooftops that help bring other commercial development into the city over the duration of this. That's going to be a benefit, to the community as well as the district. As was mentioned the last time, also, this development also includes some quality of life tangibles in terms of some hiking trails, parks, and that would come about as a result of this as well. So my recommendation is that if the consensus is there, that we move forward in partnership with the city in this. But again, it's open to discussion, President of that.
Oh, questions or discussion on the Rural Housing Incentive District?
So I have a list of notes and discussion. I was online and watched back our meeting, and also thank you to the city for posting it on your YouTube too. Watched your meetings as well and wanted to make sure I really understood and want to make sure that I'm really understanding all the intricacies of this and how it impacts all of our districts, I think that first of all, kudos to the city of Spring Hill for trying to do all that you can to help your citizens of Spring Hill. I think that it is really great. I mean, everything that you just said, Dr. Luttrell, as far as we need commercial development, we need economic development. All what we're hearing from everybody on repeat is how much people are hurting right now as far as their own personal budgets and how our tax rate, I feel like that's the message on repeat in Spring Hill and around, is that we're just overtaxed. We're overtaxed. What can we do? And I do applaud the city for looking for ways to bring in opportunity to help then offset some of that. And I know I just listened again this morning to Mayor Berkey on the recording saying that individually this wouldn't increase the tax amount for everyone as a whole. But from a school district perspective, I do have some concerns. I'm concerned that we haven't talked with Rob as much yet to get projections. I am concerned about, we will need another bond. I mean, we're already talking about another high school. If this now opens up the door, which obviously it would, to need another elementary school, then we're going to have to fund that in some way. So I'm not feeling confident in the projections that we have, meaning kind of like a strategic financial plan, strategic growth plan. And I'm just, it's sitting a little uneasy with me on that. I don't have a lot of confidence at the moment that a bond would pass. So then that would negatively impact our district because our class sizes could be a lot higher in all of our schools. If we don't pass another bond, we can't build another school. Like, are we looking at this and without Rob's numbers? And really, and I think he's done a good job over time of giving us some statistics and projections. And so I'm concerned about that. So again, I think the city has done a great job, but as you mentioned, Dr. Luttrell, we've been talking about this. They've been talking about it for a while, but our real first in-depth conversation was just 3 weeks ago on Saturday, on November 19th. And so we haven't been really talking in depth about this for a long time. And that isn't the city's fault at all. I don't mean to, I'm not placing any blame in that, but so I'm not saying that I'm for or against it at this moment. I'm not feeling confidently moving forward with it without feeling like it. First of all, thinking of how people are hurting. I mean, everybody just got their tax projections and things in the mail, and I was inundated with that. I mean, a 10% increase. So it was a little hard pill to swallow. And so yes, the mill, I think if my notes are correct, that we didn't really raise the mill levy, but our property taxes went up so much that it really impacted people. They're hurting. And then this is maybe a one mill increase over time, but we don't really know how much this is going to increase for our patrons if we don't know, are we going to need a bond? Do we have a financial plan with this? Would we need to build another school? I'm just not feeling like we have quite the answers that we need at this moment for me to make a positive direction decision. I'm not sure I said anything bonded. I think I've said most of it. I mean, there's other things like $300,000 houses. I don't know. We talked about that on the November 19th. I want to ensure we are watching our word choices. Is that affordable for the people in this area? I don't want to, as a school district, take on some of that word choice of the developer. But that was my last note. But I think that my bottom line is I just am not feeling confident in being able to protect class sizes and building sizes and being able to build new buildings that would support a project if we don't have a concrete plan on maybe if we had a bond issue and if we didn't, like what are the options if we did and if we didn't moving forward. So.
I would, as I stated at the last meeting, I would kind of mirror a lot of those sentiments. I think this project is really, really great for the city of Spring Hill and could bring some positive things to our district. But currently, from the information we have, it's at the expense of the district. And so I just don't think I would love to see Rob's projections and numbers and have our bonds council take those and evaluate it with his numbers. I really think that we are looking at half the data. And like I said last time, a very microscopic piece of what's happening in our district. But I think that maybe there's other options moving forward. I would love to hear them. I think 18 years is a very long time to commit ourselves to something. And as we see increasing costs, I mean, with everything, what does that look like? Again, then do we ask for more money later? Oh, we made this one decision on half information. I just really think that we just don't have it and can make a very educated, good decision for our entire district.
Dr. Luttrell, I've got a question kind of along those same lines as the last two comments. Is there any way that RDS, and I know they like to have every last I dotted, T crossed, triple and quadruple checked before they issue something to us. Is there any way we can get some preliminary what they're seeing early in the month of January rather than waiting clear to the end? Because that's obviously past the 30 days when this is.
Yeah, I could ask, I know I asked again right after Thanksgiving. I guess that would have been week before last, around December 1st or 2nd, just saying, hey, do you have anything for us? Could you move that up? Are we still going to go for that January 30th date, that work session? And he said that it was, that again, he was running many different models. Plus, we're not the only district he has, but that he did not feel comfortable committing anything prior to that end of the January date. But again, I can always go back and ask, but.
And again, I'm not looking for a final report, but at least if he had some idea of trends or
Yes.
anything that we could,
I know
better than nothing.
Yeah, and again, without speaking for him or stealing his thunder, I mean, I do know just the preliminary indications that he has provided to me. Again, and I've seen nothing in terms of, it was not an official report, but that his numbers and models are going to be they're going to be that we are not going to be on the trajectory that we've been on in recent years. Even the trajectory that he gave last March is going to be altered in the two factors. Well, and again, I'm not going to go, but he just says that again, there's so many things that have come out now that we're on the other side of the pandemic that he's having to take into account. And that while we are going to grow, it's not going to be at the rate, especially at the elementary levels. But again, he can go delve into all that, but that's kind of what
I just think it'd be good to have him at the next meeting with just anything he's got. I mean,
okay.
I know he's not going to have a final report, but at least he would have some improved knowledge over what we have right now.
I completely agree. If there's any information we could get from him, I would feel much more comfortable feeling like we made an educated decision. I mean, especially post pandemic and the numbers changed so drastically. I think we were projected at adding 250 this year and we added 125. I mean, that was about 50% of what we were projected. So our numbers have changed and we don't know exactly why. I think that he he would provide a lot of insight. I mean, I was even a little surprised when I was looking at this information about the population of the city of Spring Hill from 2020 to 21 dropped 1% in growth. That kind of surprised me. So I feel like all of these things factor in. And as we're looking at school and sizes of school and bonds needed and all of that, we really need his input. I did have one other question. I have two questions, I guess. I know one of the questions that we've asked is, and maybe it's a city question and a district question. Was there any concern legally? I think we asked this on the 19th, any concern legally if we went forward with this developer and we went forward with this whole project and basically signed off on it. And then another developer comes to us or comes to the city in a year. And I know that in the notes, it said that the city is unlikely to pass that on, but is there any legal responsibility in that? Like, can you say yes to one and then no to another?
That's a good question. I have talked with Greg Gillian, our district council, on that, and he has indicated that there would be no legal jeopardy of approving this one or going with the city with this one, and then later on saying for a different one, saying no, that we can evaluate each project on a case-by-case basis.
And there would be no legal ramification then?
No
Okay.
precedent set that we
Right.
get sued over.
That's good to know. Thank you for finding that out. So I guess kind of in a move forward, if you're going to be able to talk to Rob, do we need, I mean, we'd probably have to have a special meeting. I'm definitely not trying to halt anything for the city. That's not my purpose at all. I just want to make an educated decision for the people that we represent. So January 7th is right after the holidays and before we have another meeting, because we only have this one this month. You what? So yeah, we're 2 days past. So do we need some sort of formal motion to say that we aren't moving forward with this, but it's not that we are, or I don't know how this works.
I think also we heard, the negative view side of it, I think. But also one of the things you brought up is that we've built capacity based on the projections that we built capacity in our facilities based on the projections from our demographer.
Mhm.
We haven't met those. We're 150, which creates, actually, we already have built-in created capacity that we had thought was going to be taken up this year, but it's not. So there is capacity within the elementary schools, within our facilities to handle this kind of a thing. Number one. Number two, if we look at these numbers, I think, Doug, you worked with Mr. Varenberg, where it's basically 1% over the 18 years. Did I read that? It's about 1% impact.
Yeah, it's very minimal when you look at the big picture.
So if we look district wide, there's a potential 1% impact to the revenue generated. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, which was listed in the description. Yeah,
Right.
under number 2.
But Doug, tell me this, that's not counting any new development outside of this area, which would increase our student count, which would help us. But depending on where those homes are built, it would also increase our valuation and what they're sold for. So it could hurt us and we would have to. That data is just looking at adding this. It's not looking at adding anywhere else in our district. So if we weren't growing and we weren't building anywhere else, that data would be great and right on. But it's not, because we know there are outside factors not included in that report.
Yeah, that's just for this project is the notes that I wrote down.
Yeah, I do know Greg Varenberg, and it's one of the documents that was shared with you, tried to pull out that mill levy with and without, and you saw that it came out to about a 5.5 mil difference. I think what stands out to me is, and I don't know if Phil would be able to pull up, it's the USD230 Spring Hill. Let me switch. I'm looking at one. To me, it says a lot. I'll tell you what it says to me. I think it's the summary one. No, it's the mill levy analysis one. I'm sorry, the very first one.
Yeah, that's the one I pulled up.
I'm sorry, it's the different document. It's the one labeled Spring Hill Mill Levy Analysis. That long one, long description.
That's what he opened.
Yeah, I'm up above. Go up there. Up. Did you? I'm sorry. Okay, then it's page 6 then, page 6.
Oh, oops.
Hold on, let me get it back open. Page eight. I only have one screen. I'm used to functioning with 2. Yeah, this here is, I look at this, I'm looking at what that mill levy needs to be and what are we doing during those years. And you'll see that he does have a projection built in here of doing a $30 million bond issue and a $100 million bond issue. So that is your elementary number 6 and your potentially your next high school. That's built into those mill levies. We're currently setting at 17.6 mils. You see that it does go up a little bit. Then it goes up quite a bit from 2005 to 2030, but then it starts dropping off. So we know without a doubt the high school, when that point comes, it's going to take a mill levy increase. So just plan on that. It's just way too much money. So when you look at these and go, okay, there's going to be a mill levy increase for the high school. Really, I just don't foresee this creating a mill levy increase by itself. And we're talking about building these based on old growth numbers. And like President Updike mentioned, we have capacity available. We have plans to build a 6th elementary down the road that if our growth is slowed down, that keeps getting put out further and further and further. So I do think there's room here that if our enrollment is declining, this project would get us kind of back on track maybe to meet what our existing projections are, is all I'm saying. And not have a major impact on the mill levy. Just my opinion, but I agree. There are a lot of variables here, a lot of things to consider. And unfortunately, we could speak hours and hours about those variables and not get a clear picture. It's somewhat of a gamble, but it's a matter of looking at all the positives, weighing them against the negatives and see what's best. But at the end of the day, this project is small compared to our overall assessed valuation and our overall budget. So it doesn't, when I first looked at this, I was a little scared. The more I looked at it, I was a little happy. And then the further I went, I think this is going to spur commercial development, which we are in desperate need of. So if they could promise us that commercial's coming, hey, I'm all on board. This is a great thing. So that's what we need. And that's what we'll be able to control the mill levy with, is when that commercial shows up. So I wish I had a crystal ball that could predict that that's definitely going to happen, but I think there's some indication it will.
And then to follow up with that, the one thing too, going back to Rob's Schwartz's report that he gave last March, and those demographic study reports, if you really read the whole thing, there are pieces deep in that report that delve into last March. He did take into account all of the known land that has been marked for development and how many houses are marked into that potentially, and done his calculated potentially if those were done into the calculations. And now, again, I think what's going to drive his numbers to some degree is there's no crystal ball, as Doug said, in terms of when will those get built. And then now, especially whenever those numbers were put together, well, close to over a year, he's probably calculating those this time a year ago. If interest rates were still 3%, but they're not. And so but those, a lot of the known areas of development are hidden in that report and taken into account into those projections to the degree that he is able to. Now, there probably have been some that have popped up, a few here and there since then that's new, but those would be included in this time as well, but.
And Doug, I do highly value your input and opinion and agree with what you were saying. I think my biggest issue is kind of what you just said, Dr. Luttrell, as far as it was probably a year ago and our projections aren't what they were. It has changed. We have new data. We have new information. I wish that we would have been talking about this sooner so that we could have asked Rob sooner. And so, I mean, now we're kind of in the middle of the holidays and in crunch time. And I just feel like we don't have all the information that we need. So again, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying just don't feel adequately prepared.
What's the last date? Is it the end of the month or when was the?
January 7th, right?
In terms of the 30-day window, the 30-day window, they closed it on the 8th last Thursday, so 30 days from that 8th. So it would be around the 7th, I'm guessing, of January.
I personally don't have a problem with this project. I've got more concern with it, just the setting up of the precedents. I think it's a good thing for the city and it would help. I do see some benefit down the road, but one project is one thing and 5 projects is a whole other thing. I don't know if there's anything that we can do if we collectively let it slip by, that we could have some kind of a statement or something that we're going to try and experiment on this one and we don't plan on, trying to avoid setting up a precedent. That's all I'm saying.
I agree, Nels. I don't have an issue at all with this. I think it's the amount of area that it covers, the potential number of houses that would be built and generated is very small compared to the rest of the district. The overall rest of the district is really, this one project is not going to drive whether we build a new elementary or not. I don't believe that. Do you think, is that a fair assumption, Doug or Dr. Luttrell?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if our growth kicks right back in and does what we were looking at a year or two ago and gets back on track and those kids are rolling in, this could potentially move up that timeline to get that next elementary going.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's going to suddenly mean, oh no, we're going to have to add a 7th elementary too, to make it all work.
So we're talking about one developer on how many acres is it? It's 140 or something like that, but that's not all even. And how many developers do we have up on the south side of Olathe? There's thousands of acres under development versus 140, and there's dozens of developers versus one. And so just looking at you said it's 4% of our total, right? So there's 96% of our district is not under this kind of a situation. And that's really what would drive, from my perspective anyway, that's really what would drive the need for a new elementary or middle or whatever. But we have capacity. We've created during the previous, 8 years, we've created all of this capacity. And since things slowed down over the last 2 years, that capacity still, so we haven't used up that capacity. We still have freeboard, so to speak, that we hadn't originally planned on. Is that a fair assessment? I don't want to.
Yeah, and the 4%, keep in mind, I'm telling you, our assessed valuation today is 400 million. What it's projected to be in 5 years is more like 600 million. It's gonna, I mean, you got your tax bills, it's going, that piece is still going up. So it's 4% today, but realistically in 5 years, it's probably more like 2 to 3%. So as we grow, 18 million keeps shrinking and shrinking as far as the percentage goes of the total.
Right. So the impact diminishes over time.
Yes.
So I do understand that, and it isn't this project at all that I have issue with. It's not the 4%. It's not this amount of land. It's not this particular developer. It is lack of feeling like we have the information, the projection from Rob and the company that we use to help project and make educated decisions instead of just, I don't feel like I can look at people and say, I'm sorry, I didn't have a crystal ball. Like that doesn't, I can't do that. I feel like I need better information so that they don't look back at us later and say, how did you let that go through if you didn't have you didn't even have all the information? So why you just sat back and said nothing? Like that's what I'm struggling with.
I don't really have a problem with this project, and I do think that we need to be a little bit cautious of what we ask for, because there are other economic development tools that the school district doesn't have any say in. And those funds that we do capture in this, the general fund and the capital outlay are included in a TIF or IRBs. And so this kind of situation, even repeated, might be a better option than some of those things as far as our perspective goes. So.
Yeah, agreed. All very true.
I think this is a good project for the city, and I was just sitting here thinking about this. That's something I haven't heard anybody bring up. I'm looking at the map of the RHID, and if you pull the 40 acres out of it for the parkland, it's probably almost the same acreage as the property directly to the north that has never been able to get off the ground. And I would imagine by the time this is close to being built out in 18 years, you're going to start seeing some houses on that property, whether it gets bought by this developer or by somebody else. And you might see another, I don't know, 150, 200 houses on that. And you're going to we'll be getting the tax collections from that. And otherwise it's just going to sit there like it is now. You're not going to get anything. So I think it'll develop along with it. Maybe not, obviously not as quick. But at the end of 18 years, I would not be surprised if there was something there.
For sure.
It'll work out.
My hope is that we could have, if you could ask Rob, like you said, that we could have additional information and not delay. My goal is not to delay the city, it's to have information. So I don't know if I need to motion for another meeting, or I'm not sure what the process is supposed to be. And perhaps we motion and the rest of you don't feel like it is needed to have another meeting or more information. And then at least I've gone on record saying that I'm asking for the information.
We have a couple options. One is that we could table this, establish a special meeting this evening for January 7th. Make sure that we need to make sure that we're within the boundaries of the that 30-day window that they started on the 8th. Would that be the 8th, or would that be the 7th? I'm not sure. I'm supposed to be looking at out there. I see a lot of heads moving. I'm not sure who to look at with the decision. The 7th. Okay.
This is set.
And that's a one?
A set.
So we'd need to do one. We'd need to either have a special meeting on probably the 5th. Now that's one option. The other option, and that's done based on the assumption that Rob Schwartz could provide us something.
That's true.
Right. There's that.
If he can't, that's I guess that special meeting would have an agenda for RHID. And that would be it. And so a decision would be made either with or without Rob Schwartz. Yeah, and we can't modify the agenda though.
Modified special meeting?
Yeah.
You have to have the action item already on that special meeting agenda. To
Okay.
do what you're talking about tonight, to call a special meeting, we'll need to add an action item to the current agenda.
Correct.
So that has to be done first.
Mhm. We're just talking options right now though. So. I don't know. What's the consensus of the board? I mean, if we want to modify, take an action tonight, that's the other option.
My input is that I have no intention of stopping anything. So I'm not looking to motion to stop it. I'm looking to gather information to make the decision. That's just, I don't want to speak for anybody else but me.
I'd like to hear what Rob had to say personally, if we can.
So it sounds
I
like,
would I'd be in favor of special meeting.
so first thing we'd have to do to establish that tonight would be to someone would need to make a motion, second it. We'd have to approve, pass it to modify the agenda. And then we'd have to go through a motion to add an agenda item to create a special meeting. Second, and it would have to pass.
So I'm sorry, can you?
So you'd have to move in second to amend the agenda
For tonight.
for
Okay,
tonight.
gotcha. Okay.
And then after, if that passes, then we move second, vote on adding a special meeting
Okay.
on January 5th.
Okay, so Mr. President, I motion to amend the agenda for tonight.
Second.
I'm sorry, who seconded?
Nicole.
Nicole.
Okay.
You want to
Oh,
amend the
to
agenda
amend the agenda, to add a special meeting
on January 5th.
on January 5th.
January 5th.
Is that,
That's what,
because that date, I guess we should have asked everyone, like,
Okay.
can we even do that?
it's moved and seconded to amend the agenda to add
That's a Thursday.
a action item to create a special meeting on January 5th. Any discussion or conversation?
We just need to make sure everybody's available too.
Andy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
approved.
Okay, so next is we need a motion to establish a special meeting on January 5th with a date or a time and agenda. So that's the next motion.
Just a question though. So do we don't, for the agenda, for the special meeting, we have to include an action item on that agenda in order to have an action item or not?
Correct. You can't, once, when you have a special meeting, once you establish the agenda, you can't modify the agenda within that meeting. Like in a regular stated meeting, we're doing what we're doing.
So if you have an
Right.
action item on there and we choose not to take action,
Just
we
goes
can't
away.
do that?
Yeah, you can do that.
You just,
You can do that,
okay.
but you can't add to that agenda because we have to publish the special meeting.
We can't add an action item to the agenda.
We couldn't add it. If the action item wasn't on the original agenda, you cannot add it.
But
during a
we
special
can,
meeting.
so in this motion, do we need to include, like, we want Rob's data? Does all that need to be in the motion? Or you mean, you're talking about just the action that we're gonna take has
So there would be a discussion item. The agenda would consist of the discussion item for the RHID. And the second agenda item would be as an action item for the RHID. And if during the discussion,
would be Rob.
we don't have to execute the action item, but it has to be there on the original agenda.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So another question, if Rob can't provide us any information, so we don't have any new information, do we cancel that meeting? Do we still have the meeting? Do we, if
I'd
that's
like
what we're waiting on, is that
I would
information?
also like to hear from Mr. Goheen.
Hmm. Mhm.
Can we do that?
I'm not sure we can.
I'm just kind of curious about the,
Agreed.
because I don't think the Rob not having the data for us was because we didn't ask for it, because he usually comes in November. And it was him saying he doesn't have it
Like I said,
ready.
I emailed Mr. Schwartz way back in August, as soon as our enrollment numbers started coming in. And then he, like I said, started analyzing it. At that point, we met in October And that's when he said, I'm working on it. And I said, when can you have that? And he said, I'm not going to be able to have it till January. So I mean, I have been in contact with him, but like I said, he's just, again, very thorough, and it's not just, he's not just something he wants to just, give his hunch. And so, but he has been in contact. We have been in fact, I initiated with him back in August early on. But again, he definitely, like I said, I mean, in terms of what I guess would like to have a little bit of guidance on is he's going to want to know if he doesn't have the complete analysis ready, what specifically do you want him to provide you? So that we get the right information to you so that we don't get to that day and like, well, this isn't what I was wanting.
I think he needs to tell us what qualifiers apply to the data. I think he has to be very crystal clear as to what the data consists of, what assumptions it's based on, and what what doesn't necessarily meet his typical level of rigor. So it's very clear that it's draft or initial data and information.
I'm guessing he's scratching his head a little bit about what's going on. That's probably part of the delay. Yeah.
Sure.
I mean,
I would just like to hear his input on that though, too. Like, what is he seeing? It's not just our district. What's he seeing statistically and what's his input? I mean, he's the expert in this. So just having a conversation with him about how the pandemic affected and how our growth rates and what does he think about the 1% decrease in the city of Spring Hill and overall, I mean, I don't want to look at just the city of Spring Hill, but overall our district, but I think it would be really great to have his input.
Yeah, I'd like to have him use our information that we were given about the RHID and kind of butt it up against his information and make sure we're looking apples to apples. So when he gives it to us, it really aligns with what, and I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
Mr. Bauerberg.
Yes, Craig Vonberg. Yeah.
So
We can't have him solve world peace for us. We need to give him guidance on what it is that we really want. You know what I mean?
I don't
mean,
think
it's
I asked for
not
that.
Just a
I
growth
think I
trench.
just asked for,
hear what's going on.
I just asked for him to compare reports. I don't think I asked for world peace.
Compare which reports?
Actually, the one that's in the agenda or the agenda, the mill levy analysis. So there's quite a bit information in there that he said he thought he used from prior projections. So I'd like to know if those still line up.
if what changes he has and
Yes.
updates that he has. I mean, again, like Dr. Luttrell said, it has probably been a year since he put this together and last March was our last presentation. So surely there's some sort of update, even if it's preliminary.
And I think
You can
that
bring world peace. I mean, that's amazing too, but that's not what we're looking for.
right after Christmas.
Well, I just want to try to put a fence around this because he provides it a very broad spectrum of data and information. He's already mentioned that, you know, he's struggling getting it together and whatnot. So if we have a specific thing that we want him to focus on, he can provide that rather than his full analysis.
Absolutely.
And I think it's critical that he tells us and he's clear what assumptions he's making and what the incompleteness, the level of incompleteness of the data, because so that we're not, I mean, he has a 7% accuracy rate, and if he's at 85, we know it's at 85.
Yeah.
So we aren't
Well, and
coming back around to him saying, you told us this, and he can point to the
That's
assumptions.
what I think he's trying to avoid.
Yeah, exactly. I would too. I mean, wouldn't you if you've got a
Sure, but we
reputation?
have the luxury of waiting. another
well,
year.
and unfortunately, we didn't ask him, we didn't have these conversations before, a big conversation before 3 weeks ago, Saturday. So that's not his fault, right? That's not his fault at all. So I would definitely want him to know we would not fault him for preliminary information when
Yeah.
we've given him such a tight timeframe.
So it's growth numbers.
Well, yeah, so a lot of things that are calculated in there, here's where I want to see that the numbers that are calculated, that are used to calculate this 1% mill levy increase are the same that he would use in his information. So
He doesn't But he doesn't do that.
Well, I mean, it gives us number of students, things like that, and different years. Like there's quite a bit in this report.
So like the number of students that they're projecting for I see.
Yeah. I want to make sure the data that Raymond James used aligns with what he says. They said they tried to, but we know it. We haven't seen anything from RSP yet. So we don't know that they align.
Okay. Clear. That provides the clarity, level of clarity that I think he needs. It's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on what we're asking?
No, I'm good. I mean, I'm good. But I think it's very pointed though that we make sure as I think Director Anderson was alluding to, is that the work, Rob's not a financial analyst. And so the numbers that Greg is putting together aren't really gonna, he's not gonna be able to make much sense of it. What can happen though, I think, is that, because they do, believe me, they do work kind of in concert together already. I mean, and so this mill levy analysis that was completed, okay, did use all of the numbers from last March that Rob had. Okay, now, are they gonna would these reflect the numbers that he's redoing that? No.
Well, I think that's what I want to know. I mean, we've all sat here and said the numbers are changing, but they used prior numbers. So the data we're looking at right now is incorrect.
So at this point, we'll have a special meeting on January 5th. That's if there's a motion and a second, and that passes, and we'll move forward from there and make a decision on the 5th.
So for me, it comes down to like one phrase, due diligence. I want to be sure that we're doing everything that we can to make a decision. So with that, I would motion to add a discussion item for our RHID and an action item for RHID to our special meeting on January 5th to move forward or not.
Second.
Do you need anything else, Candy?
Yes, I need a time. Oh. At
January
7?
5th is a Thursday, if I looked at that right.
Thursday.
7, our normal meeting time? Okay, I'll add that to the motion at 7 PM.
It's moved and seconded to create a special meeting on January 5th at 7 PM. The topic of discussion is the RHID Rural Housing Investment District. There'll be a discussion item on that and also an action item. Any other discussion or comments?
You can change agenda on as far as the discussion, right? That the discussion could be.
If you leave it wide open and say it's discussion.
Yeah.
We're fine.
So
If
don't
you
be,
specify what that discussion is, you can't add to it.
My assumption is we would stick to, the conversation would stick to
Yes,
RHID.
absolutely.
Right.
I was just saying what that consists of is.
I think it's any data, any information, any discussion are focused on the RHID. It's not,
Yeah, because
Right.
if
We
you
can't-
say Rob Swartz, Greg Goheen, and you don't add anything else into it, and you decide you want another bond representative, we can't add that.
so it'd be discussion item would be RHID and we could.
Right.
We could invite those that we feel have the information that we need in order to make a discussion. So we could have RSP. Greg Berenberg, I forget his firm now. We could have Greg Goheen. We could have
Okay.
city representatives. So we good? Any other discussion? Comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
Mr. Ewing,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
yes,
Mr. Hoffman,
No.
Mr. Updike,
No?
Mrs. Mitchell,
No.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Milius,
Yes.
Pass 4-3.
3.
Okay,
One,
moving
two,
on to our
three.
next.
Yeah, it's 4 yeses and 3 nos, so it is approved.
Moving on to superintendent entry plan summary. Dr. Luttrell?
Yes, President, for time's sake, I'm going to combine the superintendent plan summary and the superintendent's report because they both overlap. But like I said, I have promised from day one that in addition to the entry plan, I would, after my first 100 days, complete a report that kind of indicated what were some of the major themes that emerged during that listen and learn tour. I've completed that. I've got for your reading. It's also online as well as, within the board docs. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but again, main thing I want to stress is that this is not the end all to end all. It is not saying that these are the sole items that we need to focus on moving forward. It was just more or less the themes that emerged that helped provide me a framework of discussion as a springboard of some things that we could maybe try to look at tackling and having conversations on immediately as we move forward. It's not, like I said, not earth shattering, but I do think it helps provide us some starting points to that. And then, like I said, in addition to that, as I said, I envision that in working with our executive leadership team and our building leadership team, as we take these themes and some of these components that are mentioned in here, if we determine that they do have validity and priority, we can look at modifying, as I mentioned last time, modifying the format, not the content, but the format of our current strategic plan, which is set to run through 2028. And then from that, we can, now that we finished up our 5th year cycle for accreditation, we'll be starting year 1 next year. We can have the content that we come up with as major themes from this, incorporate those into our strategic plan as part of what's existing. And then we'll be basically back with a 5-year strategic plan through 2028 when we start the 23-24 school year. So I'll keep you abreast, on that information. But I do think there's some great information in here. As I said before, it didn't matter what group you talk to, people do have very positive attitudes about the school district, the educational experience, the word that we used tonight. We talked about the reading and the language arts, the rigor that is present in the education. They also feel, though, as we said, that we can always do more. And that's what the report kind of also addresses, that while there was no area where in any theme that emerged that constituents or stakeholders, whether it was students, staff, parents, municipal leaders, business leaders, that just said, hey, you all do a terrible job of this. It was all, you do great, but then there are areas we can also look at enhancing and making stronger. So you'll find that throughout the report. But like I said, I'm glad to have that completed and out there, and look forward to receiving feedback on that. Then a few other items in my report. Like I said, it got jumbled earlier with my good news, but I did want to now, like I said, we finally did have gotten from this summer project at the middle school with our tractor that we did. We had done everything completed this summer except for the rubberized synthetic surface on that. We waited until late fall to do that for weather and that. And so, but we finally have that all complete now, and it is at the middle school track and football stadium. It's now reopened and available for walking and that for our community on that. The one thing I do want to ask and remind our patrons of, though, is that, again, our district does put a lot of money, as you hear tonight, to maintain pristine facilities. And hopefully we want to make sure that our patrons, everyone that use that facility, take pride and they do take good care of that. Because whenever you leave trash around or you do things that shouldn't be on that surface, it does, have an impact. And so hopefully, as I said, we're going to have it open, but people will have pride in maintaining and caring for use of that facility. And then, as I said earlier, I mentioned a couple of Colton McKenna was one that was named to the All-State football team for first team defense. And then the two students that were named honorable mention were Mark Debiak and Carter Meek, who were named as honorable mention. Our semester concludes the 20th of December, which, like I said, is basically 6 days, 6 school days from now, and we will commence back with students on the 5th of January 2023. And our next general session of the Board of Education non-special session set for Monday, January 9th. So that's my 100-day report that I want to mention, as well as some of the things in my normal superintendent's report. And like I said, I try to rush that, like I said, because we are late for our celebratory dinner that's been prepared over the Administrative Services Center by our culinary arts students. So we do have some vendors in that over there that'll be wanting to, like I said, visit with us. And then we also, hopefully some of you will be able to make it to some of our holiday programs. I know we have over up at Wolf Creek Middle School tonight. We have a joint performance, I believe, from the choirs, Spring Hill Middle and Wolf Creek Middle. So hopefully some of you can make that. I think that starts somewhere around 7. That's all I have, President Updike.
Very good. Thank you. We're adjourned.